Good day, everyone. Today, our group will be delving into the fascinating and complex topic of crime and divine behavior. Our group consists of Daniella Wright, Orika Murray, Khadine Vialva, and myself, Tiffany Jagroop. Crime refers to the behavior that violates the law, while deviance encompasses a broader range of actions that go against societal norms and expectations. Behaviors that challenge established rules or societal expectations play a significant role in shaping the way we define order and structure. While some actions are deemed illegal and punishable by law, others simply diverge from cultural norms without necessarily being unlawful. Understanding these distinctions is key to grasping how societies maintain control, establish boundaries, and adapt to changing values. Both concepts are crucial to understand as they shed light on the functioning of social order, the boundaries of acceptable behavior, and the mechanisms societies use to enforce conformity. In today's directed discussion, we'll explore what these terms mean, their connection, and why they're essential to understand. Let's start by defining them. What is crime? Crime, the intentional commission of an act usually deemed socially harmful or dangerous and specifically defined, prohibited, and punishable under criminal law. Crime encompasses actions or behaviors that breach established laws and are subject to penalties enforced by governing authorities. These acts disrupt the social order and can vary widely in nature and severity. To better understand the multifaceted nature of crime, we categorize it into distinct types. Violent crimes, such as assault and robbery, directly threaten the physical safety of individuals, often leaving lasting emotional and psychological scars. Property crimes, including theft and vandalism, result in financial loss or destruction, undermining individuals' sense of security and ownership. White collar crimes like embezzlement and fraud are typically committed by individuals in professional settings, exploiting positions of trust for personal gain and causing widespread economic repercussions. Finally, cybercrimes such as hacking and identity theft reflect the growing challenges in our digital age, where the misuse of technology can compromise personal privacy, financial systems, and even national security. These categories not only highlight the scope of criminal behavior, but also underline its impact on individuals, communities, and societies as a whole. What is divine behavior? Divine behavior is defined as actions that violate social norms, which may include both informal social rules or more formal societal expectations and laws. Divine behavior encompasses actions or practices that diverge from societal norms, which can be broadly categorized into informal and formal divines. Informal divines involves behaviors that are perceived as socially inappropriate or unacceptable and do not necessarily violate laws. Formal divines, on the other hand, pertains to actions that contravene established laws, regulations, or codified societal rules, often resulting in legal consequences. Examples of informal divine behavior. Informal defiance involves actions that disrupt social expectations but stop short of breaking the law. These behaviors may provoke disapproval, discomfort, or criticism from others. Common examples include gossiping behind others' backs, which can erode trust and harm relationships, arriving late to work, reflecting poor time management and disregard for workplace expectations, sharing inappropriate jokes in a personal setting, which can create an uncomfortable or unprofessional environment, using profane language in public, often viewed as disrespectful or offensive depending on cultural norms, staring at others inappropriately, which can make individuals feel uncomfortable or objectified. While these behaviors may not warrant legal action, they can lead to social consequences, such as damaged reputations or strained interactions. Examples of formal defiant behavior. Formal defiance involves more severe actions that violate legal standards and are typically punishable under the law. These behaviors can range in severity from minor offenses to acts considered highly egregious. Examples include domestic violence, which entails harm or abuse within intimate relationships and is a serious societal issue; sexual offenses such as rape, harassment, or stalking, which deeply violate personal boundaries and safety; Murder, considered one of the gravest violations of moral and legal standards, theft and robbery, which infringe on property rights and personal security, acts of assault, physical violence, or bullying, which threaten individuals' physical and emotional well being. These forms of formal defiance not only harm individuals but also disrupt the broader social order, necessitating legal interventions to maintain justice and safety. Violence is a symptom, not an inevitability. Violence often stems from unmet needs, trauma, or social influences. Psychological theories such as Maslow's hierarchy of needs suggest that unmet physiological and safety needs can result in behaviors aimed at survival or asserting control. When individuals face chronic stress, their brains may activate the fight or flight response more readily, leading to impulsive or violent reactions. Trauma, particularly unaddressed or compounded over time, can alter the brain's processing of emotions, making individuals more prone to aggression. Social learning theory also explains how observing violence, whether in one's environment or media, can normalize it, embedding it into one's behavior as a learned response to conflicts or frustrations. Early intervention and support can prevent criminal behaviors. From a psychological standpoint, early intervention is crucial because it targets the development of cognitive and emotional skills that foster resilience. Programs like therapy or counseling help individuals address anger management, impulse control, and emotional regulation, rewiring maladaptive patterns before they escalate into violence. Cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, works to identify and change negative thought patterns that may contribute to aggressive behavior. When individuals receive emotional support and positive reinforcement early on, it can foster a sense of belonging and self worth, reducing the likelihood of turning to violence as a coping mechanism. Address the root causes. Psychologically, poverty, discrimination, and societal pressures can lead to feelings of hopelessness, frustration, and anger, emotions that, when unchecked, may manifest as violence. Additionally, systemic issues can perpetuate generational trauma, with children inheriting emotional and behavioral patterns shaped by their caregivers' experiences of violence or oppression. By addressing these root causes, we can promote emotional healing and break cycles of harmful behavior. Restorative practices focus on understanding and supporting individuals through their psychological structures, ultimately fostering empathy and healthy coping mechanisms. I will now hand you on to my colleague.
Thank you, Ms. Jagroop. I am going to touch on how media influence the role of crime. Media significantly influences public perception of crime, influencing fear, public policy, and justice judgment. Reports often focus on violent crimes, creating a distorted reality. Reporting based on race, class, and location also influences perceptions. Sensationalism, which uses dramatic headlines and emotional storytelling, can lead to panic and increased policing, while factual reporting relies on verified data and expert analysis. Responsible media consumption requires questioning narratives, examining statistics, and understanding bias in crime portrayal. If I should ask who Ethan Crumbley is, I am almost positive I would get a diversity of controversy answers, ranging from rage to frustration. Empathy, I am almost certain I would provoke some. Ethan Crumbley is the 15 years old perpetrator of the Oxford High School shooting in Michigan, who killed 4 of his peers and injured several. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The case shares similarities with other tragic events like Columbine and Sandy Hook, but stands out due to the legal actions taken against the shooter's parents. Hershey's social control theory suggests that weakened social bonds can lead individuals to stray from societal norms, such as family, school, and community connections. In Crumbley's case, reports of social isolation and possible bullying align with this theory. Levin and Madfize's 5-stage sequential model examines the psychological and social processes leading to mass shootings, identifying 5 stages: chronic strain, uncontrolled strain, acute strain, planning, and massacre at school. Both theories offer valuable insights into understanding human behavior and societal influences, but differ in focus and application. Hershey's theory emphasizes societal factors that prevent deviance, such as strong connections to family and community, while Levin and Mathis focus on the escalation of psychological and social factors leading to extreme acts like school shootings. Both theories offer valuable insights into addressing and justifying harmful behaviors, but differ in focus, scope, and preventative insight. School violence in TNT has escalated in recent time, with viral videos revealing increasing incidents of bullying, weapon possession, and physical conflicts among students. These altercations often happen on or near school grounds, involving students and occasionally parents. As seen in a disturbing case at Siparia West Secondary School, where a parent was beaten trying to save her relative, and the recent incident with Jaden Lawchon committed suicide after floods of bullying reports. Head police of the Southern Division ACP Wayne Mister expressed openly that Jaden's death opened a floodgate for school children with similar experience forward to report similar incidents to the police. He also reported the schools keep incidents of this nature inside its walls to avoid stigmatization and, in some cases, a smear on its prestige name. In a media briefing, the Ministry of Education has marked several schools as high risk, attributing the violence to issues such as poor academic performance, absenteeism, and low achievement, compounded by dysfunctional family environments and peer delinquency. While media coverage tends to sensationalize these events, it often overlooks the deeper systemic issues like inadequate support mechanisms, lack of conflict resolution education, and limited mental health resources. Tackling school violence effectively requires a collaborative and multifaceted strategy, promoting positive school climates, implementing conflict resolution initiatives, and enhancing mental health support through cooperation among educators, parents, and policymakers. In light of school shooting, can boys learn other ways to cope? Boys often face socialization that discourages the expression of emotions such as sadness and fear, leading to negative outlets for frustration and anger. Promoting emotional intelligence through recognizing and managing emotions can significantly improve their coping strategies. The rise in school violence among boys may be understood better through psychological concepts from Freud and Jung. Freud's framework of the ID, ego, and superego illustrates how uncontrolled aggression can lead to harm when the ego fails to mediate these instincts with social norms. By strengthening the ego through emotional education and healthy coping strategies, boys can learn to express their frustrations positively. In parallel, Jung's shadow theory highlights the importance of addressing suppressed emotions, as unacknowledged feelings can result in destructive behaviors. Encouraging boys to explore their shadow through self-awareness, therapy, and creative avenues can facilitate personal growth and emotional balance. Both theories advocate for comprehensive emotional education and conflict resolution resources to support boys in developing resilience, empathy, and healthier coping mechanisms, ultimately reducing aggressive tendencies. I will now pass you over to my colleague.
Now we will explore the various applications of psychology within the realms of forensic science, criminal justice, rehabilitation, and the study of deviant behavior. By addressing critical topics such as risk assessment, mental health interventions, and the socio-cultural roots of criminal actions, it highlights the essential role of psychological expertise in understanding and mitigating crime. First, forensic psychology and criminal justice. Through risk assessment, psychologists evaluate the likelihood of reoffending or engaging in violent behavior. This vital insight supports decisions around sentencing, release, and supervision. Competency evaluations assess an individual's mental state to determine their fitness to stand trial or their accountability for their actions. Psychological support for witnesses and victims ensures they receive the care and assessment needed during difficult times. Additionally, psychologists provide expert testimony, bringing valuable evidence and insights to legal proceedings. Next, rehabilitation and treatment. Psychologists design and implement interventions such as cognitive behavioral therapy and trauma-informed care, addressing the underlying causes of criminal behavior and working to lower reoffending rates. Tackling substance abuse is another crucial aspect, as addiction is often tied to criminal activity. Psychological therapies help individuals overcome drug and alcohol dependencies. Mental health care is essential for diagnosing and treating conditions such as psychosis or personality disorders, which may contribute to criminal actions. Finally, regeneration programs support individuals re entering society after incarceration, addressing barriers like employment challenges and social skill deficits. Lastly, understanding the root of deviant behavior. The social learning approach examines how criminal behaviors are acquired through observation and interactions with peers and family. Cognitive theories explore how thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes can shape criminal behavior. Psychologists study personality traits and psychopathy, uncovering their role in criminal actions. Environmental factors such as social inequality and economic conditions also have a significant influence on crime and defiance. And finally, cultural and societal norms play a key role in defining what is considered defiant on criminal behavior. Through these contributions, psychology provides us with the tools to better understand and address criminal behavior while also paving the way for a safer, more inclusive society. I will now pass you over to my colleague.
Now we're going to discuss one of the most notorious crimes and the leader behind it, Jim Jones, and the Jonestown Massacre. Who was Jim Jones? Jim Jones was the founder and leader of the People's Temple, a religious cult that gained international notoriety after the Jonestown Massacre in 1978. In the 1950s, he founded the People's Temple, a movement that combined elements of Christianity, socialism, and racial equality. His group attracted a significant following, particularly among African Americans, due to his message of social justice, equality, and his reputation for being an advocate for civil rights. In the early 70s, Jones moved his organization to California, where the People Temple continued to grow, and he gained a reputation for being a charismatic yet manipulative leader. However, beneath the surface of his utopian ideals, Jones exhibited increasing signs of erratic behavior, paranoia, and authoritarian control over his followers. In 1977, Jones and his followers relocated to a remote area of Guyana, South Africa, where they established a settlement called Jonestown. The community was marketed as a utopian paradise free from the corruption of American society. However, the reality of Jonestown was far darker. People live under extreme conditions with little freedom, and Jones maintained strict control over them. He frequently made paranoid statements, asserting that the government or other enemies were plotting against him and his followers. The Jonestown massacre occurred on November 18, 1978, after a U.S. Congressman, Leo Ryan, visited Jonestown with a delegation to investigate claims of abuse. During the visit, some members of the community attempted to escape, and Ryan and his party were attacked by armed members of the People's Temple as they tried to leave the area. Congressman Ryan, along with four others, was killed. In the aftermath, Jim Jones ordered the mass murder suicide of 900 people, including children. The method used was cyanide poisoning, which was mixed into a fruit drink. The members were told it was a revolutionary suicide to protest the oppression they faced. Those who attempted to resist or escape were often forced to drink the poison, and many died in the tragic event. It remains one of the largest mass suicides in modern history. Now, let's take a look at some of Carol Tyler's perspective on police and group behaviors. One is that our fears of risk and rejection override our impulses to act alone, therefore compelling us to do the quote unquote right thing. Sometimes when we want to act on an impulse, like to say to do something unconventional or outside of the norm, fear of rejection or failure can prevent us from following through. For instance, someone might want to speak their mind in a group but hesitate because they worry about how others will perceive them. So the fear of not fitting in suppresses the drive to act according to one's true desires or instinct. Another is, in a group, we shrink from loner heroics. This means we are reluctant to embrace the idea of Solitary, individualistic, or heroism because it often ignores the complexity of real life as opposed to collaboration, support, and shared efforts because these are typically more valuable than solitary endeavors. Now, some implications for policing and crime preventions include the concepts of authority, group influence, and bystander effect. These all significantly shape people's responses to crime in different ways. These social and psychological factors can result in either positive intervention or passive inaction, depending on the context and the interplay of these influences. Now, let's break down how each factor influences behavior. Authority. Authority figures like police officers, leaders, play a crucial role in shaping responses to crime. Because people often defer to authority figures when deciding on how to act in a situation, especially in certain and uncertain or ambiguous content. People are often willing to follow instructions from authority figures, even if it means engaging in actions they would not otherwise consider. This can sometimes lead to people either failing to intervene in a crime or actively enabling it, depending on the authority figure's behavior or orders. Another one is group influence. Group dynamics or peer pressure can also play a significant role in how individuals respond to crime. People tend to conform to the behaviors and expectations of groups they belong to. Like, for instance, if a group collectively chooses to ignore or downplay a crime, individual members are more likely to do the same, even if they might otherwise intervene on their own. Another is the bystander effect. This refers to the phenomenon where individuals are less likely to intervene in a crime or emergency situation when other people are present. Several factors contribute to this, like social influence, anonymity, and the fear of making things worse. The bystander effect increases the likelihood of inaction in larger groups where responsibility is refused and people is diffused and people feel less pressure to step forward.
I will now hand you over to my colleague.
So let's take a closer look at these three cases. We're going to compare some case comparisons like crime, media, and justice. So we're going to take a look at the first one, which is Eaton Crumley. So this happened in 2021. A 15-year-old Eaton Crumley carried out a school shooting, killing four students and injuring several others. His parents were charged with involuntary manslaughter for failing to prevent the attack, which is rare in school shooting cases. The media coverage focused heavily on his mental health issues and troubled family life. Unlike some other mass shooters who are framed as monsters or terrorists, Crumley was often portrayed as a troubled teen who fell through the cracks. This raises ethical concerns. Why do some shooters get sympathy and discussions on mental health while others are labeled terrorists or gang members? So, if we take a look back to the roots of deviant behavior, Crumley's case highlights social learning theory. He may have been influenced by violent media, social isolation, or some home instability. And he also shows here that the group influence and policing is that his parents' lack of intervention plays into the bystander effect. They ignored warning signs and they didn't act on it. So, should school shooters be tried as juveniles or adults? Should the media focus more on crime prevention rather than shooters' personal history? So, moving on to case number two, we're going to talk a little bit about some local issues like Trinidad and Tobago school violence. It's not uncommon, and there has been an increase in school fights, bullying, and weapons being brought onto school campuses. Multiple videos of violent fights went viral up to this day, causing public outcry. Schools responded by introducing new discipline policies, including suspensions and stricter regulations. The media coverage here shows, unlike Crumbly's case, there was no focus on mental health or troubled homes. Instead, the media framed the students as violent and out of control. The viral videos became the main story without deep investigations into why these students were engaging in violence. The media pushed for stricter punishment, but few discussions emerged on counseling, conflict resolution, or restorative justice. So, going back to deviant behavior environment in this case, many of these students likely come from high risk environment where violence is a learned response. Other students film the fights rather than stopping them, showing how group psychology affects crime. Should school focus on harsher punishments or rehabilitation for violent students? Does social media make youth violence worse by rewarding viral fight videos? So it's just something to consider. And now we're moving on to number three, the Jim Jones and the Jonestown massacre that we spoke about earlier. So, like we said, just to recap, he's a cult leader that led over 900 people to mass suicide. They drank Kool-Aid, cyanide, laced Kool-Aid, believing they were sacrificing themselves for the greater cause. The media coverage here is that the media heavily sensationalized the cult aspect of the massacre, portraying Jim Jones as a charismatic but insane leader. Instead of focusing on how people are manipulated into cults, the media focused on the bizarre and shocking aspects of the event itself. However, this tragedy led to stricter laws against cult activities and religious abuse. Now, if we look back, to go back to the previous slides that we discussed, the psychology of crime, this case shows how social learning and authority influence people. Jones brainwashed his followers into absolute obedience. People feared rejecting Jones' commands, demonstrating why some individuals follow dangerous orders even when they know they are wrong. So could something like Jonestown happen again in today's digital world? Should the government regulate cult-like groups to prevent tragedies like this?
Now I'll pass you back to my colleague, Orika.
Now this shows how the statement is true. That a crime is a crime no matter who commits it. That the legal and immoral implications of a crime are not dependent on the identity or status of the person who commits it. Essentially, it emphasizes that the law should be applied equally to all individuals, regardless of their social positions, wealth, race, or any other personal factors. The principle behind this statement is rooted in fairness, justice, and the idea that legal system should not show bias or favoritism.
Now I'll pass you to my colleague, Khadine.
Now we're going to engage in a deep and thought provoking discussion on some of the most controversial aspects of crime: false confessions, the death penalty, justifiable crime, and the impact of media on public perceptions of crime. We will explore the psychological and environmental factors that drive criminal behavior and question whether our justice system is fair or flawed. So let's dive in. The first one we're going to look at is the ethical dilemmas in crime and punishment. There are certain questions in criminal justice that don't have easy answers. Today, we'll discuss three highly controversial ones. The first one is false confessions. Should police be allowed to use deception? In many countries, police are legally allowed to lie during interrogations to get suspects to confess. They can falsely tell a suspect that there's DNA evidence linking them to a crime or that their friend already confessed and blame them, even if that's completely false. This has led to innocent people confessing to crimes they did not commit, especially under intense pressure. For example, the case of the Central Five. Five black and Latino teenagers falsely confessed to a brutal assault after hours of coercive interrogation. Years later, DNA evidence proved they were innocent. Should police deception be illegal to prevent false confessions, or is it necessary tool for law enforcement? Moving on to number two, the death penalty. Should the government have the power to take life? The death penalty is one of the most debated punishments in criminal justice. Supporters argue that it deters serious crimes like murder and ensures justice for victims. Critics argue that it's inhumane, prone to errors, and disproportionately affects poor and minority groups. Facts to consider is that over 190 people in the US have been exonerated from death row after being wrongfully convicted. Some countries, like Norway, focus on rehabilitation instead of execution, even for mass murderers. So, should the death penalty be abolished worldwide, or is it justified in extreme cases? Moving on to justifiable crimes, is stealing for survival ever acceptable? Imagine a homeless person steals food because they haven't eaten in days. Should they be punished the same way as a wealthy person who commits fraud? Some legal systems recognize necessity defenses, meaning certain crimes can be excused if done for survival. For example, in some European countries, stealing food when starving is decriminalized, but in others, it is strictly punished regardless of circumstances. Should circumstances matter in crime, or should all criminals face equal punishment? Now, let's ask a deeper question. Why do people commit crimes, even when they know they might get caught? There are four major factors that influence criminal behaviors. Number one is environmental and psychological influences. A person's upbringing, economic status, and exposure to violence all shape their likelihood of committing crimes. Poverty, childhood abuse, and gang culture often push individuals toward criminal behavior. Many serial killers, such as Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, had childhood trauma and antisocial behaviors in early life. Moving on to number two is risk versus reward calculations. Some criminals weigh the risk and rewards before actually committing a crime. If the reward seems higher than the risk, they may go for it. For example, white collar criminals commit fraud because they believe they won't get caught. Some people shoplift in big stores assuming security won't notice small thefts. Do criminals act rationally, or are many crimes driven by impulse and emotion? Moving on to number three, neuroscience and crime. Research shows that some criminals have brain abnormalities that reduce their ability to control impulses. Studies of psychopaths reveal that they have low activity in the part of the brain that controls emotions and moral decision making. For example, brain scans of violent offenders show reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for self control and rational thinking. If criminal behavior has biological roots, should we change how we punish criminals? Moving on to number four, moral disengagement. How do criminals justify their actions? Many criminals don't see themselves as bad people. Instead, they find a way to justify their actions. This is called moral disengagement, convincing yourself that what you're doing isn't really wrong. For example, a gang member may say, I had to do it to protect my family. A corrupt CEO may think everyone cheats a little in business. Should society treat criminals differently based on whether they feel guilty for their crimes? Now let's talk about something even more powerful than the law, the media. Have you ever noticed that some crimes get more media attention than others? This is not random, it's because the media controls the narrative of crime. So let's take a look at number one. Does media sensationalism increase crime? Some research suggests that heavy media coverage of violent crime may inspire copycats. Serial killers and mass shooters sometimes seek fame, and excessive coverage may motivate others to do the same. For example, the Columbine school shooting received massive media coverage, inspiring other school shooters to copy their tactics. So, should the media limit its coverage of violent crime to prevent these copycats? So, moving on to number two, how media shapes the public attitudes towards crime and punishment. If the news focuses on violent crimes, people believe crime rates are rising even when they are actually dropping. If a suspect, if a suspect from a minority background, media coverage is often harsher. For example, white shooters are often described as mentally ill, while black or Muslim suspects are labeled terrorists or thugs. For example, research shows that black suspects are more likely to be shown in mugshots, while white suspects are shown in yearbook photos. So should the media be held accountable for biased crime reporting? What if crime stopped being reported in the news? Moving on to number 3. Would crime rates actually go down? Would people feel safer, or would they be less aware of dangers? Does the media have a responsibility to inform the public, or does it create unnecessary fear? Just something to consider. As we come to the end of this discussion, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've explored. Crime is not a simple act, it is a consequence of psychology, environment, social structures, and human decision making. The justice system is not just about laws, it is about power, morality, and the thin line between punishment and rehabilitation. We began with the basics, which is the crime versus deviance. Not all actions that challenge societal norms are criminal, but many behaviors that begin as deviant can escalate into criminality. The difference between an outcast and an offender is often just a matter of legal definitions and cultural norms. We examine the power of the media in shaping crime narrative. Sensationalized news reports do more than inform, they influence public perception, policy making, and even the outcomes of trials. Whether it's school shooter receiving a sympathetic backstory or a violent student being labeled as irredeemable, the media dictates who is villainized and who is excused. We explored forensic psychology, the science behind criminal behavior. Crime isn't just a product of bad decision. It can be linked to neurological abnormalities, childhood trauma, environmental influences, and social learning. The justice system often treats offenders as monsters to be punished rather than individuals to be understood and rehabilitated. But should the presence of psychological conditions change the way we punish criminals? Aside from that, we also analyze some of history's most infamous cases: Jim Jones, Ethan Crumley, and Trinidad and Tobago school violence. Each case is a study in authority, manipulation, and societal response. The Jonestown massacre revealed the dark side of group influence and obedience, while school violence in modern times highlights the role of social media in amplifying crime. We confronted the toughest ethical dilemmas in criminal justice. Should police be allowed to lie to suspects if it means solving a case? Does the government have the right to take a life through the death penalty? Is stealing ever justifiable if it's done for survival? These questions force us to rethink the very foundation of our justice system. The bigger question, justice or control, if crime is often influenced by society, psychology, and media narratives, then what is the true purpose of our justice system? Is it a tool for restoring justice, ensuring fairness for all? Or is it a system of control, designed to punish, suppress, and maintain order, even if that means sacrificing fairness? We must decide, because how we treat criminals says more about us as a society than it does about them. A call to action: we need to challenge the narratives we've been fed about crime and punishment. If we truly want a safer, more just society, we cannot rely on fear, punishment, and control alone. We must address the root causes of crime, advocate for rehabilitation where possible, and hold the media accountable for how they frame criminality. The justice system must evolve. It must become fairer, smarter, and more effective, not just at punishing, but at preventing crime before it happens. What if we focus on intervention instead of incarceration? What if we prioritize mental health treatment over life sentences? What if justice wasn't about vengeance but about change? And so I leave you with a final thought. If justice is truly blind, why do some criminals get life sentences while others walk free? If we truly seek justice, are we willing to question the system that enforces it? And if we want a better society, are we ready to fight for a justice system that we actually would deliver? The choice is yours. I would also like to end this by thanking my team members who made this project possible and a success. Good day to everyone. Thank you.